the Shure MV7X. The X is for XLR. They took out the USB output on the MV7 and turned it into an XLR only microphone. Am I recording? I was actually wondering why they even made this microphone, and then it was pretty clear that when you looked at the price of similar Shure dynamic microphones, the SM7B, which the MV series is based on, it's pretty obvious, and the SM58, which has similar internals, the capsule with the diaphragm, the coil, etc., all the stuff on the inside. It was clear that Shure wanted a dynamic microphone that could fill the price gap between all of these microphones. Super important, full disclosure, Shure did send me this mic for review. I am keeping it. It'll allow me to test it against other microphones in the future. My goal here really is so that you can hear another voice go through the MV7X and then decide for yourself if it's something that you think is going to work for you. The SM7B is $399 approximately US. The MV7 is $269, and the SM58, which we'll hear in a minute, over there is $99. So Shure, and I confirmed this with them, had a need for a dynamic cardioid polar pattern microphone aimed at content creators who had a budget that could buy them more than the SM58, but was less than the MV7. There's about $170 difference between those two mics, so it makes sense to have something at a price point somewhere in the middle. But who is that person? Who might buy this microphone? According to the box, just like the MV7, this mic is built and aimed at podcasters, and in small print it says musicians. Generally, I'd call that target audience anyone online who is making audio or video content. And to me, video plays an important role in who might decide to go from an SM58 to an MV7X. So now you're hearing me go back and forth from each microphone, the SM58 and the MV7X, and you likely don't hear a lot of difference. And I think that's probably good, because if you like the way the SM58 sounds, but you want a different look, you can upgrade to the MV7X. If you're a content creator who makes audio only content like podcasts, or you're a singer, you do voiceover, you're a streamer, you name it, the SM58 has always been a solid choice. It's affordable, high quality. It just does the job really well, and it will survive anything you put it through. But if you create content that involves video, like I'm doing right now, then you might start to care or think about how the microphone you're using actually looks on video. A podcaster who live streams, for example, if they're using a dynamic microphone, they need to be fairly close to the microphone like I am now, because of the low sensitivity of dynamic microphones. And as you can see, these mics are very much in the shot. Now, if you've seen one microphone in someone's video in the last 5 years, it's almost certainly been the SM7B. Let's throw that on. Flat frequency response. We're going to need 42. Let's go 5 dB. 5 dB more on the SM7B. And now you can see I've switched so we can compare these two together. You can hear the difference between the SM7B and the MV7X as I go back and forth. But the SM7B is a $400 mic by itself, and then you probably want to add an inline preamp like a Fed head or a cloud lifter to get the 7B up to line level with a clean output. If you want the look but you don't have that kind of budget, then the MV series not only gives you the look of a barrel-shaped broadcast microphone, but because it's a Shure and the design both inside and out is based on the SM line, you get a similar sound at around half the price in the case of the MV7, but now almost a third of the price when you factor in extras you might need with the SM7B, like that inline preamp. When you go with the MV7X, I think the main point again, why this microphone exists, is simply more choice. If you need a dynamic cardioid pattern mic to help reject background noise and maybe a little less susceptible to reverb. Essentially a mic that fits better into non-ideal recording environments that most content creators, you and I, are working in. And you like the sound of the SM series, now you have more options when it comes to the price with the MV7X. Honestly, I'm kind of surprised that this wasn't a USB only microphone first. I think that might have more interest from people who want an SM7B like sound and look, but don't want to spend the extra money to get it, or don't want to deal with an audio interface. Maybe there's a future MV7U. P.S. I have zero knowledge of that being a thing. I'm just riffing. Because it's an XLR only microphone, there's not a lot of features on the MV7X. So straight from the box, voice isolation technology. Okay. Mostly this feels like marketing speak for a dynamic microphone. They define voice isolation technology as separates your voice from unwanted background noise, record uninterrupted audio every time. Essentially, there's no processing happening like a noise gate or something else. But when I asked, I was told that it's the name they gave their overall acoustic design and performance. Man, what does that mean? It's a combo of the cartridge, shock mount, and acoustical tuning, which I think is frequency response, that make up this voice isolation technology. More translation. It's a dynamic microphone, which means it's not very sensitive to distant sound pressure levels. You need to be really close to move the diaphragm. And this is every dynamic microphone. It's internally shock mounted, and it has a frequency response that has some low end cut to it, which essentially can decrease sensitivity to low pressure sounds like rumble and maybe some wind. So because the SM58 and other mics like it also have similar characteristics, I think this is mostly marketing aimed at people who understand microphones less, and it wouldn't make as much sense to say, oh, hey, it's a dynamic microphone. Again, if we consider the target audience, people who are less likely to come from an audio background, it makes sense to tell them what the mic does, and calling it one term like voice isolation technology lets you encapsulate several features into one. Or more importantly, it explains the value of a dynamic microphone in a way that's easy to put onto a box or marketing material. That said, it still seems a little confusing, making it sound like you're getting something more than what you'd get from another dynamic microphone. And that's why I really wanted to figure out what that meant exactly. So hopefully that explains it. All right, now that you've had a chance to hear the MV7X, let's talk a little bit about some of the things that I like and don't like. I'm not a big fan of the windscreen on here. It seems to always kind of be loose or sitting just above the microphone. Kind of like that, always kind of has this gap in it. And that doesn't really affect the sound, obviously. It just kind of looks a little cheap. One of the nice features of the SM7B is that its windscreen has this plastic ring on it, and it clicks into the SM7B so that it never comes loose or comes off. And so when we go down in price, that's probably one of the small compromises that you make, little details like that. Without the windscreen at all, it looks pretty odd. Unlike the SM7B, again, where if you take off the windscreen, which some singers do, or even voiceover or whoever's using the microphone to get more of that high-end detail, this mic actually looks pretty cool with its windscreen off. Of course, that's subjective. It might look also silly to you. Again, compared to the SM7B, having the XLR out of the bottom is not as cool as having the XLR attached to the yoke. And that gives me less clearance underneath the microphone. I have the XLR and the wire all underneath here. And for someone like me who uses a low profile boom arm, I would rather have that XLR out of the way and up here above the microphone where the SM7B is. Also, I had at least one plosive while making this. And I'm a few inches away from the microphone, and talking sort of across it instead of right down into it. So I am trying to limit plosives. It seems like it could be a little sensitive to plosives. So just something to be mindful for, but you should always have good mic technique that limits plosives. I do, of course, really like the all metal construction, even down to the yoke itself with the screws on the yoke. Screws tend to be plastic, so all metal, that's really nice. So it has that weight of a quality microphone. And then of course it's a Shure, so it's designed to just last. It's obviously more sensitive than the SM7B. I don't have the gain as high. In this case, I'm going direct to the Rodecaster Pro. I'm at 37 gain, which has given me enough signal that I can then raise in post-production with keeping the noise floor at a minimum. And that's what you're hearing right now. That's the only thing I've done. There are no effects either in the Rodecaster Pro or in post-production added to this recording. So obviously you can make it shine by post-processing the audio. This is going to sound fantastic. And I really do like the sound quality from the MV7X. I really like the MV7 as well. It's brighter than both the 7B and the 58. It's likely due to the tuning they've done for the voice isolation technology. Essentially, it's mid-focused, mid-frequency focus. It's going to cut through some background noise. It's not going to be too muddy, which is actually an issue that I hear too often from creators, especially since there are so many SM7Bs out there and people like that smooth, dark sound, but it ends up being too muddy. So I would be more likely to post-produce my audio the way that it is coming out of the MV7X natively. So that's nice. You could still get an SM58 for almost $100 less, and then you could EQ it to sound like an MV7X if you really like it. Or if you do want some of that lower end, natively the SM58 has a little bit more, which you can hear when we went back and forth from the 58 to the MV7X. It really just depends on the sound you're looking for. And of course, the SM7B has frequency adjustments right on the microphone itself. So you could customize the frequency response to sound like the MV7X. Again, you get more options with that microphone, but it's considerably more cost. A couple hacks here. If you wanted to do it, you could get this RK345, which is the SM7B or one of the SM7B windscreens that come with it. You could buy this for about $15 and throw this onto the MV7X if you wanted to. I've seen some people do that. And you get a little bit more of a form factor closer to an SM7B, but your windscreen is actually further from the capsule itself, so it should actually also help with plosives, giving you more of a gap in there to disperse of any plosives that go into the microphone. And if I could, I would take the logo off, but because this is a Shure, it's not a cheap sticker. It is on the microphone, so you can't just peel it off and get that nice, sleek, plain barrel microphone look. Other than that, it is a dynamic XLR microphone. It's pretty basic. It does what it's supposed to do really well. And if you liked the sound of the microphone, you like the look, which is probably more going to determine whether you buy the microphone or not, I think the MV7X is a good choice, but almost certainly you'll probably have more questions about it. So leave those questions in the comments and I'll see you next time.